Hi, this is Celeste with the Celestial Report, and today we are going to discuss something that I just found out about this week. And you know that I'm the proverbial researcher, and I knew nothing about it, and yet it is going hypersonic. I would say probably at the speed of AI. There's this huge industry that has just popped up out of nowhere. And it's like I get food journals and I'm into the science journals, and I really truly never saw it until this week. So now, please excuse me. It's been a kind of a crazy week this week, and it's going to be crazy next week. And so I did not have time to put a PowerPoint together. So I'm just going to share my Word document and we'll discuss it together. I was going to do just a very short, like a 5-minute introduction to the topic, but then at the rate that this is turning, starting to unroll, I thought that it would be best to go ahead and give you as many details as I can. Not, I think it's like a few pages of a Word document, so it's not going to be too uh, much. I'm not going to look at the chat until afterwards. So if you have a question, you might want to jot it down on a piece of paper or in your phone or something. And then when I can conclude, we'll do a brief Q&A. So let's see if I can get this up here. Oh, wait a minute. Not going to do that. Let me go to my presentations. Oh boy. Let's see. We can get this bigger here. Oops. I don't know. I'm not sure. Guess I should have experimented with this part of it. Let's see. Okay. And then I'm going to get this bigger. Okay, so what I'm talking about today is photon food, and basically a photon is light. So no food on Earth is made solely of photons because, of course, we have mass, we have taste, we have all sorts of things which are basically particles of light. Photons are particles of light. Photons themselves are massless particles of light that supposedly cannot form matter in and by themselves. But as we're going to see, the technology, either is this quantum physics or however they're doing it, I'm not sure. They are giving some tangibility and mass to the photons. All food derives its energy from photons. That's why we're talking about photons, because it's energy. And many of you have been commenting that maybe you have a lot of energy, you're bursting with energy, and some of you are very, don't have any energy at all, and you really don't know why. And part of studying about this photon food is going to maybe help give you some answers of why this is happening in your body. So photons are specifically sunlight that is captured in plants via photosynthesis. This is the one reason that the powers that be want only plant-based foods. And we'll go into that in just a few minutes. So photosynthesis converts light energy, or the photons, into chemical energy that's stored in organic molecules, things like glucose, starch, and cellulose, which make up, our food. Also, interacts chemically with our bodies. So these molecules form the basis of all foods, and plants produce it directly, but animals, there's an extra step or two, because what the animals do is they consume the plants, which has the energy, the photosynthesis, And then that's, there's kind of a chain reaction, kind of like dominoes. Photons themselves are not ingredients in food. The energy they provide is the source of all biological energy in the food chain. So you're not going to have energy unless you have the photons. Thus, while the food does not contain photons as a physical component, it fundamentally is powered by photon energy. So that's why we're talking about, and that converts to plant energy and health or not health, and people energy, health or not health, animal energy, health or not health. So photon energy, this is down at the bottom, the photon food, flexible mid-infrared photonic solution for rapid farm-to-fork sensing of food contaminants. This is a article put out by the European Union. It is to farm to fork is a system that was to level the playing field, basically get rid of the old system, reset it to the new system of what we're going to talk about in a few moments, under the umbrella of food contaminants. So you're going to be hearing a lot of news articles, media coverage on the contaminated food supply. And that's the reason that we need to go to photon food, although you haven't heard anything about it. I did give you the hyperlink for that so that you know that it's not Celeste making this up. It really truly is a European Union venture. And that's really interesting because it was a 4-year research and innovation project that was sponsored by the EU 2020. Oh, what happened in 2020? Interesting. And that it is a collaboration between 13 partner organizations in 8 European countries. I find that number interesting as well. Whenever we see the number 13, mischief is afoot. So if you've been following me like from 2010 to 2020, I was talking about the food supply and that the United Nations wanted to sell food by the kilocalorie. That is 1/1000th of a calorie. And basically the gist of it was you would get 3/4, your food supply allotment would be 3/4 of like an energy bar. And that's all you would be allowed for 3 weeks. That's what they were talking, the UN. Now, DARPA, on the other hand, wanted to sell food by the molecule. And of course, at that time, they were not talking about photons. So what we have to do now is, because what they were doing is getting their plan together, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and basically how to starve mankind, how to make them think they're getting food, but that they're not really getting food. So we have to understand a little bit. It'll be up, this document will be up on celestialreport.com, so you can reference it, so you don't have to get it all out right now. But let's go through. So what is it that the kilocalorie was that the United Nations wanted to give us? That's 1/1000th of a calorie. It is used in nutrition and biology. 1 kilocalorie equals I'm just going to round it to 1.4. It should be 1.2 because you round up. And it is the energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 centigrade. So basically what it is it is describing the energy content of the food or a metabolic process. And see, your mitochondria inside your cells need energy. So so this is like the biggest unit is your kilocalorie. Then we bump down. So the kilocalorie is actually the largest of all of it. Of course, it's very different than the calories that we get today. So we bump down to the molecule, and that is the energy associated with a single molecule. And it depends on the state and the chemical bonds and the thermal energy, like what is the temperature. So for instance, here's the energy stored in a single molecule, and this particular molecule, we'll say, is comprised of glucose, which is sugar, during metabolism, and that this is 2,800 kilojoules. So, in as we're measuring these energy units, the unit, instead of like inches or pounds or whatever, it's measured by joules or kilojoules. So this is a thousandth of a joule. And actually, and then molecules and photons are really small, so they put them in clusters, because it's kind of impractical to just refer to like one photon or one molecule of energy because it's just so small. So they put it in a cluster of 500 and they call that a mole. And it's not the mole that's outside eating your plants. It is just a mole is a cluster of 500 energy, the kilojoules that we're talking about. So that's the next one, that's the medium one. And the baby bear here is the photon. And let's see if I can't get that any bigger. So the energy of a photon, this is interesting. It depends on its wavelength and frequency. And this is going to become really important in today when we've got all sorts of things going on, like the loss of our magnetosphere, the solar flares that we've all been seeing, the sun either, right now we're in a high active state with solar flares, but we're about ready to go into the quiet phase. The frequencies, we are getting bombarded with foreign frequencies like cell towers and just different frequencies that mankind really has never had before. Now let's discuss a little bit about a photon and just see the difference between this and a molecule. So, and this depends on its wavelength, of course, so that would make it different colors, of course. So here's a green photon, and that's 500 nanomoles. I think it's nanomoles. Anyway, it's almost 4. I'm going to round up at 10 to the minus 19th joules. So it's I don't know if I mistyped that or what. Anyway, kilojoules. It's 0.24. I'm going, that doesn't make sense. 0.24 kilojoules per mole. And then they translate this into hertz. And so you'll see something has this many hertz or that. So hertz, just so you know, is different than volts. And I don't know that we'll go into that at this point, but just realize that frequency, wavelength, and hertz all go together. A UV, of course, the UV, because our magnetosphere is diminishing, we're going to get a lot more UV light for the rest of our lives. And that has the energy of 1.2, a little bit more than the green photon, but it's kilojoules per mole. And a mole of 500 nanomole photons contains approximately 240. So this is 500 photons, or a mole is 240 kilojoules per mole, which is comparable to the energy in a small apple. Now, I know your head's spinning about right now. Mine is too, because like How are they going to even do this? So I haven't got to the end of my research on this. I just want you aware of it right now. But what I'm thinking is going to happen is that you will have some type of a vessel or a container, and inside it will be a specified amount. Will that be a mole of photons? Will it be a single photon? And that is going to have wavelength or frequency. Now, what is this container, skin, vessel going to be made of? I don't know the answer to that. It will probably look like food. It's going to look like bread. It's going to look like an apple. It's going to look like a piece of lettuce, but it's not going to be the value of it. The energy inside is not, it's going to be at the kilojoule level, very minimal. And also, you will not have the nutrients, you will not have the minerals, and all the other things that original design food has. So you will have to pay for all of those things extra. And so the price of food to be healthy is going to go way, way up. Or you might think of this as a starvation or a light diet. Okay, so let's just do a quick synopsis or review of this. So a kilocalorie equals 4.2 kilojoules, and it is a macroscopic energy unit that is going to be used in this algorithm where they make this industrial 3D printed, not original design food. One molecule, and for this instance, we're going to review the glucose, is 4.65 times 10 to the minus 21st kilojoules. It's extremely small, but it is very significant in biochemical reactions. Like, how are you, is your food, is this food going to go and make you fat? Is it going to make you skinny? Are you going to have metabolic disease? What is it going to do? How is it going to react in your body? Then there's the one photon, which is 500 nanomole, which is 3.98 times 10 to the minus 19, or 0.24 kilojoules per collection of 500 moles of light photons. So the energy per photon, when scaled to a mole, becomes meaningful, because remember, a photon is so small, it's not even worth really mentioning. And so it will be lumped in as a mole, and that's 240 kilojoules per mole. So while a single photon carries very little energy, a mole of photons can deliver substantial, or what they call substantial, energy compared to a kilocalorie. So another place that you can check this out is photonics21.org, and that is also referring to another EU and photo food. We're talking about moles, and remember, we're not talking about the garden moles now. We're talking about a collection of photons, and it refers to Avogadro's number. And this is similar to a mole of any other substance, such as atoms and molecules, and is used to quantify large numbers of photons in chemical and physical context. And in our context today, we're talking about what are they going to do to our food, and they're going to turn it into photon food. Just some interesting facts about this whole situation. The term mole is a standard unit in the International System of Units, also known as the SI, for measuring the amount of a substance. Now, that's very interesting because the mole and the photon do not have mass. So we're going to discuss that next. So that's why how can they do that? How can it be a substance if it doesn't have any mass? Because we all know, here I got my shriveled up apple here, that it has mass. You can see it. But in this invisible food, this new light food, what is it going to be? Let's find out a little bit. So photons, despite having zero rest mass, like, well, it's that apple isn't going to be a zero rest mass. They can still be measured using the International System of Units because supposedly they carry energy and momentum. And momentum doesn't have mass either. So that's kind of interesting. So they're kind of mixing and matching. I guess when you make the rules, you could break the rules, I guess. Let's see. So basically, this Avogadro's number and the mole of photons is used in photobiology. So you can actually see the auras of plants and fruit and that kind of stuff. It's really kind of beautiful. I think there was a Russian, I can't remember the name of it now. There's a particular photography that you can actually see the radiance coming out of a real original design fruit. Now, the question begs to be asked, is this a synthetic virtual twin artificial photon food? Yes, it will have a photon in it, but it's not going to provide you anything else. So what will it look like under, cerulean photography? And then there's the photosynthesis research. So the energy of a photon is determined by, as we discussed, its frequency and wavelength. And that is the Planck Einstein relationship. And we've already discussed this. A photon energy is measured in joules. It does involve the Planck's constant. What am I saying? And there's, I love to see the number symbology in the words and also the numbers. So here's a 666. Just saying. It is frequency, and we discussed that it would be in hertz. It will travel at the speed of light. There will be wavelengths that are associated with it. And the energy of the mole of photons depends on the wavelength or the frequency of the light and is calculated by multiplying the energy of a single photon by Avogadro's number. The concept is particularly useful in fields like photosynthesis, where the number of photons rather than the total energy drives the biological processes. But why we're even going down here is because they're changing the whole food industry, and it's going to be based on photons, which are very tiny. As you can see, this is kind of the logo. You can see a couple different things that I saw in it. This would be, if you put this together without the tuning forks here, the symbol for infinity. But you've got these two tuning forks, and since we are dealing with wavelengths and we are dealing with frequencies, so a regular tuning fork would have two tines, but this is a very specific tuning fork because this one has four tines and this one has four tines. And so there are two different, and I'm not going to go into it. You can read it if you want to deep dive in it, you can. But there's two different measuring devices: a frequency counter that has four terminals or tines, and a digital multimeter, also known as a DMM. and it also has what they call is 4 prongs. In the old days, if you remember your VHS units and all that, and you had one of those old camcorders and you had the 4 different plugs and you had to plug in all the different things. This is kind of the equivalent to that. So the 4 prongs may also refer to the test leads with 4 banana plugs. Of course, now this will be, especially digital, you're not going to have that. So now we got a really interesting tie-in because um, back on page 1, maybe I will if I go back to page 1. Well, let me go back to page 1. I just want you to remember what page 1 looked like. So hold on. Whoops. I want you to remember this. So this is on the tab of, now it is just a partial, it's a snippet of what we see over here. It's a snippet. Like, let's say it was cut off here and it was cut off here. But what does that tell us? So how will this photonic food interact with the dynamic sun and earth changes with the magnetosphere, and also all of these different frequencies and wavelengths? So what we just saw, I took you to the first page where they took a snippet of the Photon Food logo, is very similar to the squatter man found by, that was carved by the indigenous peoples on petroglyphs and was discovered by a physicist, Anthony Perret, and is reproducible in plasma physics labs. Like Sandy, he worked at Sandy, I believe, and this is what. So you can see the this, and you can see how the legs are here. You can see the hands. So Anthony Perret believes that the indigenous populations, like 10,000 years ago, like at Gobekli Tepe, saw this plasma discharge in the sky and wrote it in, as a kind of like we would read the newspaper or our emails, wrote it down for posterity. So now we have to ask, could photon food be associated with atmospheric cold plasma or ACP technology, where reactive species, those are the oxidizing things in our body, called RONs, and they're very oxidation and reactive species are very harmful to the body. And UV photons, which we know we're going to get more of from now until the end of our life, and other plasma generated particles can be used or can be a part of modifying foods. They can enhance shelf life, they can extract compounds or actually mine minerals out of your food. They can alter the protein not only in the food that you eat, but in the food of your body. And it can also change your antioxidants. So here you're paying a lot of money for these antioxidant vitamins, but what is happening in the atmosphere could wipe all of that out. You might have to take double or whatever. I'm not Can anybody hear me? If you can hear me, please say something in the chat. Okay.